The genesis of today's Middle East map dates back to World War I. As Allied and Axis powers battled each other, diplomats Mark Sykes and François-Georges Picot agreed to carve the post-war Middle Eastern provinces of the Ottoman Empire into French and British spheres of influence. A deal that conflicted with British promises to other regional stakeholders, and which didn't wash with either side when the war ended.
By the time they got to Paris and the peace negotiations, the British and the French in particular took a look at what Sykes and Picot had done and were horrified by this. The British, for example, did not want the French to control the Vilayet of Mosul, which has been so much in the news recently. They wanted to keep the French out of Palestine.
Most of all, the British wanted an iron grip over lands leading to the Persian Gulf, a crucial byway to the British Empire's economic crown jewel, India, as well as oil interests in Iran. But with its coffers drained by war, Britain couldn't afford to declare the provinces protectorates ruled from Westminster. So in 1921, then Colonial Secretary Winston Churchill headed to Cairo and hammered out a deal that kept Lebanon and Syria under French rule and Palestine as a British protectorate. Transjordan became a semi-autonomous British region ruled by the Hashemite king Abdullah, seen here with T.E. Lawrence, better known as Lawrence of Arabia. The greatest experiment, though, involved the Ottoman provinces of Mosul, Baghdad, and Basra. They were corralled by Britain into a new country, Iraq, ruled by Abdullah's brother, King Faisal.
He would rule for them, he would do the British bidding in Iraq, and as a result they would save themselves the considerable expense of declaring Iraq or Mesopotamia a full-blown protectorate of the British Empire.
A colonialist construct, Iraq served Britain's economic interests in the Persian Gulf, but the country made little sense for the various religious and ethnic groups hemmed within its borders, who have always chafed under Baghdad's centralized rule. The map continued to evolve through the 20th century. By the 1940s, Syria and Lebanon were independent. Britain lost its mandate over Palestine and Transjordan, paving the way for the establishment of Israel, which grew its territory substantially during the 1967 Six-Day War. As for Iraq, its monarchy was overthrown by a military coup on July 14, 1958, setting the stage for Saddam Hussein to seize power until he was ousted by the United States in 2003. Ethnic and sectarian tensions in Iraq flared in the years that followed, creating an opening for Sunni insurgents of the Islamic State to gain a foothold in Iraq, where they hoped to undo the borders laid down nearly 100 years ago. Patricia Sabga, Al Jazeera. Russian President Vladimir Putin awarding ExxonMobil CEO Rex Tillerson the Order of Friendship in June 2013. A picture of cooperation that continues despite escalating tensions between the White House and Kremlin over the crisis in Ukraine. Since 2011, ExxonMobil has substantially strengthened its ties with Russian state-owned petrochemical giant Rosneft, inking deals to jointly build a liquefied natural gas plant in Russia's Far East, develop oil fracking sites in western Siberia, and a joint $3.2 billion project to hunt for oil in the Black Sea and Russian Arctic waters. A deal majority financed by Exxon that trades access to potentially billions of barrels of oil for engineering expertise.
Basically, Exxon is going to Russia because of the opportunities there. And Russia wants Exxon because they believe that Exxon can bring something that Russia does not have or Russia needs more of.
The relationship also gives Rosneft a foothold in the West through exploration rights in the Gulf of Mexico. Oil and gas are a linchpin of Russian power, and the ExxonMobil Rosneft deals are poised to enhance it, regardless of U.S. foreign policy objectives.
Exxon usually sends the message loud and clear. We do not represent the U.S. government. We could disagree on politics and policies and everything else. We are here to do business.
According to the book Private Empire, ExxonMobil and American Power, the company's former CEO, Lee Raymond, once said, quote, "I don't make decisions based on what's good for the U.S." So far, U.S. sanctions have steered clear of Russia's energy sector. But if that were to change, the partnership between ExxonMobil and Rosneft could be in the crosshairs. That's not to say ExxonMobil would necessarily lose out.
Let's say this crisis gets worse. That means there's more pressure on energy markets, which means higher prices, which means more revenue for Exxon.
Patricia Sabga, Al Jazeera, New York. Stretching from the Strait of Malacca to the Strait of Taiwan, the South China Sea's waters, islands, reefs, and even rocks are contested by 6 nations: Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, Taiwan, and China. One of the world's busiest international sea lanes, as much as half of the world's merchant shipping and oil tanker traffic passes through this patch of the Pacific, amplifying its economic and strategic significance well beyond the countries that border it.
So many countries, even that don't have claims in the region, are connected to the security.
Each country laying claim to the sea has a United Nations-approved EEZ, Exclusive Economic Zone, giving them rights to natural resources extending 200 nautical miles from their coastlines. The most controversial boundary, though, is China's 9-dash line. Drawn in 1947, it encompasses the sea's most contentious territories.
The Chinese have never clearly explained what the 9-dash line really stands for. They have said they don't claim every drop of water in it, but they really haven't said what exactly they do claim.
That ambiguity is a major source of tension given the South China Sea's potential energy reserves. The U.S. government estimates the sea contains roughly 11 billion barrels of oil and 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. But China's estimates are nearly 10 times higher: 125 billion barrels of oil, more than Kuwait's proven reserves, and 500 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. Most current reserves are near shorelines, but Asia's insatiable demand for energy is pushing exploration further offshore to areas around the Spratly and Paracel Islands, as well as the Scarborough Shoal.
Countries do not want to compromise on what they see as their land. They believe that they have sovereignty over the land and over the waters.
The most recent clash has seen China and Vietnam squaring off over a Chinese oil rig in disputed waters. Most of the ships involved have been fishing boats and law enforcement vessels, not naval. But with regional players beefing up military capabilities to assert and defend claims over the South China Sea, this stretch of ocean is likely to remain as volatile as it is vital. Patricia Sabga, Al Jazeera. Requests for financial aid do not affect admissions decisions. That was the claim on George Washington University's website until its student newspaper, The Hatchet, did some digging.
We realized that the messaging wasn't clear. There wasn't a clear picture of what type of financial aid policies the university had.
On managing editor Sarah Ferris's watch, The Hatchet revealed that their school, like most private universities, does factor in an applicant's ability to pay when making final admission decisions. The website was corrected, but the Hatchet scoop reverberated far beyond GW's ivory tower.
What really shocked us was the way that this really exploded nationally, because it opened up this conversation and this debate on, should this be the way it is?
Only a handful of private U.S. universities are need blind, admitting students, including foreign ones, solely on merit. Most private institutions are need aware, meaning at some point in the admissions process, applicants who need help paying for college are indeed at a disadvantage. Many need-aware colleges offer financial aid, and sometimes generous amounts of it, especially to the most desirable students. But as they move down their preference list and that aid well starts to dry up, that's when wealthier students often gain an advantage over poorer ones. At GW, where tuition, room, and board exceeds $60,000 a year, all applications are first reviewed on merit. The university told Al Jazeera, quote, "Financial need is one of the many factors that may be considered at the very end of the applicant review process," noting, quote, "We must balance the financial needs of our new class with the university's aid budget." Last year, more than 75% of students applying to college were accepted at their first choice institution. But more than a quarter of those chose to enroll elsewhere because their first choice schools did not offer them financial aid. Author Cal Cheney says students who need aid are better off targeting schools that match their talents.
If you're one of the last students that they accept, one of the marginal applicants where the school is a real reach and you need a boatload of aid, that's where it could really become a problem.
He also says there's nothing to be gained from hiding your need for aid.
The big mistake families make is that they assume, well, if you don't apply for aid, you'll just have an easier shot at getting into the school. That they're going to review all the students who can afford to pay full freight first, and then if there's space, take the other ones. It doesn't work that way.
As for Sarah Ferris, she's graduating, but she assures us when it comes to admissions and college affordability, the hatchet will remain vigilant.
I will not be at this newspaper any longer, but we have a crop of reporters who are very interested in covering this.
Patricia Sabga, Al Jazeera, Washington.